So the idea of this is to introduce you to this whole new concept and pre-expose you to a customer social style. And we're going to be spending more time next year looking into it a little bit more and learning about it and applying it within the clinic. So basically think of it as psychometrics for patients, but without them filling out any sort of psychometric quiz. So a customer social style is essentially the approach that is followed by a customer, or in our case, a patient, with how they interact in a business setting. So the model was developed by two psychologists about 30 years ago. The model is defined by two measures. You have assertiveness and responsiveness. Assertiveness relates to how likely a person is to force or direct others, so tell people. And responsiveness is how likely a person is to express their emotions. So whether they're really emotional or an emote, or whether they're a little bit more regulated. So if you're to place these two measures on an axis and create a bit of a spectrum, you can see that these four different social styles appear. So if we focus mainly on looking at responsiveness, so when people are highly responsive, they're going to be emotional, they're going to emote and share those emotions. And if they're highly assertive, they're going to be those people that will direct you and tell you. So a highly responsive emotional person and a highly assertive director is going to be expressive. A highly assertive, so that telling you, but low in responsiveness, so that emotional control and regulated, they're going to be a driver. So very clear and direct what they want and really stick to the facts. If we look at the other end of the spectrum with assertiveness and take it down to the low end, these people aren't going to tell, they aren't going to direct. They're more likely to ask. So they more so might ask for permission or may ask questions. They want to get clarity. If we have low assertiveness and high responsiveness, so high in emotions, but more of an asker, they're going to be an amiable person. If we go down the other end of the spectrum with responsiveness, so low in responsiveness, so very emotionally regulated, emotional control, and they're going to be low in assertiveness, they're going to be analytical. We're going to look through these individually to get a little bit more of an understanding, but if you can get your head around and really understand this diagram and this sort of scale and axis, it really helps you to get down to the crux when you're sort of categorizing people of thinking, no, they're very emotional, but they're not big talkers, they are small, it's an amiable, they're very emotional and they tell me about it, they're expressive. So we'll start off with the amiable people. So amiable people, because again, they're highly responsive and low in assertion, they're more likely to be a listener than a talker. So they will be emotional, but they're not going to tell you about it. They'll probably ask more questions. Really good analogy with some of the articles I was reading is categorizing the different types as birds. So think of an amiable as a dove. They're very calm, they're very caring, and they're going to avoid conflict, fights, arguments, all of those things at all costs. So in terms of characteristics, these people are quite loyal, they're personable, obviously non-confrontational, and they're really risk adverse. So they're going to be very cautious, they're not impulsive, so they're going to be a slow decision maker. What they really value is teamwork, so our model is going to really suit them. Feeling accepted, the opinions of others, so reviews, testimonials, case studies are going to be quite valuable for them, as well as rapport and building relationship. Essentially, what their overall basic need is to feel secure. In times of stress or conflict, an amiable person is more likely to become very passive or submissive. Potentially, they could just avoid the situation altogether. When you're interacting and communicating with an amiable, you want to make sure that you're establishing that personal relationship before you're jumping into business. So in our case, this would be in an inquiry call or maybe even in a consult when that building rapport is important. You want to make sure that you're just getting to know them a little bit before you're talking about the hard facts. Do allow plenty of time for conversation because you want to build that rapport, and do know that they are slow decision makers and they're very likely to include others in their decision making. So if I was to think of a few patient examples that we have now, someone like Gail is a really good amiable person. Even Brendan is quite a good example of an amiable. The next social style is expressive. So if you think back to the little axis, because they are highly responsive and highly assertive, they're very emotional and they'll tell you about it. So expressive people tend to talk more than they listen. They can be the people that kind of listen to answer as well. In the bird world, think of them as a peacock. So they're showing off their colours and they want all eyes on them. Characteristics, so very people orientated, attention seeking, emotional, dramatic, spontaneous, and can have quite strong persuasive skills. Really be mindful things like a dramatic, emotional, attention seeking to not have a negative connotation. I know it's quite natural to sort of think that way, but just be really open-minded that these are just characteristics and not necessarily sum up that person entirely. What they value is building relationships for recognition. They also really like opinions and stories over fact, and they are very focused on the big picture as well. Their overall basic need is to be recognized. In times of conflict or stress, these people are more likely to become a bit unpredictable but be highly emotional. When you're communicating, you really need to be patient. Expressives tend to cut off or over talk, or again, they listen to answer. Be prepared to listen a lot to them, but talk about themselves, and be prepared to give lots of praise, recognition to them as well. They will prefer to socialize before getting down to business. Something that's really important is that they really don't like details and can get really impatient and frustrated. So keep things light and concise and really focus on that big picture for them. Expressives do have the potential to be sort of a one pill kind of person because they are quite focused on the big picture. And important to note, they are quite slow decision makers at times as well. So some patient examples, I would say George, I'd say Georgia, I'd say Lisa James, and I'd also say Paul. Analyticals. So thinking back to the axis, because they are low in responsiveness and assertiveness, they're very emotionally controlled and they're not big talkers. They do tend to appear to be more guarded and reserved. Think of them as an owl, so very precise, very quiet and quite solitary. In terms of their characteristics, they're real perfectionists, so that real attitude of do it right or don't do it at all. Very cautious, thoughtful, rational, serious, and big questioners too. What they really value is independence, so giving them that space to make decisions. They love stats, numbers, details. They really like things to be done correctly. So organisational things, formalities, procedures, they're really going to value and enjoy that. Basic overall need is to be correct. So not correct as in they have to be right all the time, but they need to know that they're making the right decisions. And again, that's going to take a little bit of time. In times of conflict or stress, they're more likely to pull back and withdraw. They could be a bit whiny, use sarcasm, or just generally be quite negative. When communicating with them, they're not as bothered with the rapport. The information is what their priority is because they want to be making an informed decision. So do be prepared to give really clear, detailed answers and really specific examples using facts and figures, maybe explaining step-by-step processes. Coming up with a bit of pros and cons list to present information can be really beneficial for them, and also referring back to how we can meet their needs too. Do be prepared again that they're going to ask us lots of questions, but they may be quite reserved in their interactions. That's because they're processing. And these people are likely to be slow decision makers because they really like to weigh up all that information and make an informed decision. So in terms of a patient example, I would say Amber would be a good one. Paul originally came to us, I would say, as an analytical and still has those tendencies to be a real questioner. And I'd say also Marty, I would almost put her down as an analytical because she is quite solitary and quite independent as well. Our final one is a driver. So thinking back to that axis, they're highly assertive, so they're going to tell, but they're quite low in responsiveness. So they've got very good emotional control. These people, they're just going to tell you straight away what they want. They're quite direct. Think of them as an eagle, so very confident, dominating, and hunters. So their characteristics, they are really task and goal orientated people, determined, confident, more willing to take a bit of a risk, and they are very efficient too. These people are more likely to be like your type A personalities or your entrepreneurial people. What they really value is results, being in control, really doing things their way, and a fast pace. So their overall basic need, again, is to be in control. In a time of conflict and stress, these people would be aggressive and abrupt. So, if you're running late, because they appreciate and value efficiency, if you're running late, they might be quite abrupt with you. In communication with a driver, they're not interested in rapport, so you don't need to bother with small talk. And they're more likely to be the sort of person that would communicate with a text or an email as opposed to a phone call. Don't faff around, get to the point, give them what they need. They want solutions and answers to their problems, and they will become impatient if they feel that you're wasting their time. So just be professional, be efficient. They're really quick decision makers. So some really good examples of patience, I'd say Katrina Andrews, I'd say Ginger. And again, think of those entrepreneurs, think of those A-type personalities. Again, drivers do have the potential to be a one-pill person too. So definitely keep that in mind.